everyone. Welcome to The Zest, the official podcast of Orange Coast Magazine. Today we have on a very special guest who I'm lucky enough to call a close friend of mine. She is the director of production and development at Marvel Studios and has worked on movies including Black Widow and Black Panther: Wakanda Forever. Kyana Fazeli Davidson, thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely. Wouldn't miss it.
So to give everyone a quick background, you and I met in 2012 at Chapman and we became friends like pretty quickly after that. And we've done everything together from like taking spontaneous trips to Big Bear at 2 a.m. to traveling London together. So I always brag about you like every chance that I get. So I'm so excited to share your story.
I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Of course. Okay. So you grew up in England, which I think is so cool. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So my parents had actually moved to America a few years before I was born. And my mom didn't want to be away from her family when she was going to have me. So she ended up leaving America at 8 months pregnant, flying with an 9-year-old and a 4-year-old. And she ended up going back to have me. So I was 16 days old when I came back to America. And my mom traveled back with not only the 9-year-old and the 4-year-old, but also 16-day-year-old. So yeah, she ended up coming back, but we were fortunate enough to go back and forth kind of throughout my life. And I still have family out there. So, it's been great. Actually, on Black Widow, I ended up going out there for 9 months and I got to see all my family. So it's been pretty fun. Yeah.
How did your parents meet?
My dad, actually, he moved from Iran after the revolution, and he ended up in England. His family kind of all left and went to England, and he ended up meeting my mom in Manchester because she was a teacher, and he was working at the school. And so they met through kind of mutual friends. So they lived in Manchester, they moved to Italy, they came back to England, and then ultimately ended up in LA and then moved down to Irvine.
Oh, okay. Why Irvine? Do you know?
That's a great question. I actually don't know. I mean, I know a little bit was kind of, my dad has always owned his own businesses. And I know that kind of drove him to find places that made sense. And Irvine was such a safe place for a family. So I think it worked out for where they were at in their life.
Yeah. And what did they do for work?
So yeah, my dad, he actually owned his own infomercial business. So he ended up he would go to China all the time and, find really cool products, and, he would put together commercials. So, maybe I get a little bit of the producer aspect from my dad. But he would kind of source these products that he thought were really interesting, or that, where people would need in their day-to-day lives, and bring them home and kind of show us all what they were, and see if we were as excited as he was. And yeah, he would create infomercials, and he did that for majority of my life. And he did it till I was in college, and then till I was in high school. And then he actually decided that the next venture in his life was to open a winery. He sold the infomercial business, moved to Temecula, and decided that winery was his thing. So, and then during that time, I mean, it was fortunate because he was the one who was working in the family. My mom was able to raise us all. So she was stay-at-home mom for me and my two sisters, and, learned so much from that woman. But yeah, I it was very fortunate that we got to have her at home.
Yeah, shout out Fazeli Winery, by the way.
Absolutely.
Were you ever in the infomercials, or did you ever get to like work on any of them? Or
so this is a funny story. There was one. There were two actually. That there was a hair remover that I ended up like using on. It was like you rubbed it and you used it on your arm.
Told me about these. Wait, that's wild.
So my dad brought that back, and I remember doing it, and it worked so well that I'm pretty sure I was in one of like the before and after pictures. And then the shapewear. He had a shapewear, and his company was Kimaro. So it was Kyana. That's KY, and then my sisters are Medice and Rami, so it was KYMARO. So that was the brand. So it was a shapewear called Kimaro. And I think at one point I was like modeling one of them. And you would never know because it's literally just that. But
the original skins.
Yeah, exactly.
That's so funny. Well, how old are you when you're doing that?
God, I mean, probably. I think one was high school, one was middle school, and it was just like anytime he brought home something, we were always just like trying it out. But yeah, I actually don't even know if I made the final. I think I made like the planning like layout of like what it was going to be in, and they replaced me with some model or something.
Pitch though, like yeah. Awesome. So speaking of middle school, you had like something really like tragic happen to you at this point. Do you mind sharing a little bit about that?
Yeah. So, I was in middle school. I was 11 and, I woke up one day and my elbows were super swollen. Like I couldn't straighten my arm. And it was I think it was my right elbow was super swollen, and went to our general GP doctor, and, he ran some tests, and he actually thought that I had, injured my arm in some way because of how bad the swelling was. So the nurse had wrapped it, and, I went home and the swelling had like moved down my arm. So they were like, well, that can't be right. Like with this, we've clearly done something wrong. And so they ran a bunch of tests. And when it came back, they told me that I had rheumatoid arthritis. So I was testing positive for an autoimmune factor. And I was also sed rate, which is inflammation in your body. I actually was testing positive for that as well. And it was really high. So I got linked up with a rheumatologist at Chalk Hospital. And that was kind of the beginning of my journey of figuring out how to grapple what rheumatoid arthritis was, because slowly but surely it started going into other joints. So it started in my elbows and my wrists, but went into my knees. And in later life, like went into my hands and everything, it ended up in almost every joint. But it is something that, to this day, it's still something that is hard to deal with, just because you never know what's going to be a good day and what's going to be a bad day. So, but I was lucky. I've been very fortunate to work with a lot of great doctors to figure it out and try different medications. And if something isn't working, and because the goal is always to just have a normal life. So,
yeah.
But yeah.
You were on like dance team and stuff in like high school. Were you in middle school too? Like, did that?
I was, yeah. So I did dance kind of growing up throughout my whole life. And then in middle school, I was taking dance, and I was on teams, not through my school, but separately. And then when this all happened, it kind of put a big pause on a lot. And it was a big adjustment period. I mean, I missed a lot of school. I remember one of the recommendations was like having school books at school and a set at home, just so I wasn't lugging things around and putting pressure on my joints. But dance definitely took a pause. And then as I started taking the right medication and getting a handle on it all, I was able to go back into dance, and I joined the team in high school. And there were some bad days, and there were some things of just, okay, I gotta watch it and not push myself too hard. But I was really happy because at that time the medicine ended up just working. And when I was 18, I went through a mini remission. So I was able to come off medicine completely. And then actually when remission,
like it just went.
Yeah, because it was juvenile rheumatoid arthritis. So when you're under 18, it's technically juvenile. And when your body, because as hormones enter your body, everything can kind of change. And so they told me when I was younger, I might grow out of it. And when I hit 18, I could tell that I was feeling a lot better. So I started coming off, and it wasn't like 18th birthday. It was, a gradual. As I was getting older, I was feeling better and better. And I started weaning off the medication. And I went about 3 years not being on medication. I would, have an Advil here, an Naproxen here or there, but it wasn't anything that I was like, okay, maybe this is it. And then we actually were working together. And we were working an event together. And that was kind of when I realized that it was coming back, because my hand swelled up, and my knees had gone. It was when we were in Long Beach.
My God, yes. I remember that.
Yeah. So that was kind of the moment where I was like, oh, I need to go back to the doctor. And sure enough, it's been something that the remission didn't stick.
So disappointing, but I've seen you dance. It didn't set you back too much. It's the best dancer I know.
Just not professional.
So how is it affecting you now? Like now that you're older and
yeah, if this were a year ago, I'd have been like, I'm good. I actually, in March, I was in Atlanta because we were filming, and I ended up getting COVID for the third time. And for some reason, I did everything I did the first 2 times I got COVID, but the third time, for whatever reason, kind of offset my immune system. And it made me immune to the medicine that I was on. So it was odd. It was very odd. I did not think that, I thought it was going to be business as usual. I just, keep on going. And for whatever reason, it came back with a vengeance. And, so I've been dealing with that more recently, just because it's something that I haven't found that right medicine just yet. So it is something still, it still affects me and still going through it, but, it is, it's just something that you kind of have to deal with.
Yeah. Well, fingers crossed you get something soon to help. But speaking of your dance team, and when you were in high school, you went to University High School in Irvine.
Yep.
What was your career goals for yourself at that time?
It's funny. I wasn't the kid that was like, I'm going to be a doctor one day, which having a Persian father probably would have been the thing. But it wasn't ever something that I knew what I wanted to do. I think growing up with my father, who was an entrepreneur, and seeing him being able to, figure out a path for himself, that was always something that interested me. But it was kind of figuring it out as I went. I worked in retail. I knew I kind of wanted to be dealing with people, which is such a broad thing to know, but it was something that I knew in general that I enjoy working with people. I enjoy human interaction. And so it was something that just in high school, I was kind of figuring it out. I really didn't know. And I ended up going to community college because I wasn't that person that knew exactly what I wanted to do. So I was like, all right, general ed, gonna get that, cheaper experience. But it wasn't until later in my life that I was like, this is exactly what I want.
Yeah. How did you come to choose Chapman? Did you just feel a pull because I was going to be there? Or?
You were going to be there. I was like, I got to meet one of my best friends. No, I actually was figuring out, a lot of my friends had already been going to USC or UCLA, or I had one of my close friends went to Boulder. And so I had visited schools, but I, again, didn't really know. I was like, I'm interested in communications. My sister majored in communications, and I was like, maybe I want to do that. And it wasn't until my mom's friend was over at our house, and she had 2 sons who were going to Chapman. And she started talking about the school, and she was really, really hyping it up. She was like, it's a fantastic college. You should check it out. Maybe just go on a tour. And so I was like, okay, I'll do that. I'm interested. I'll go check it out. And I did end up going on a tour. I loved the campus. And then the selling point was actually, especially going to Orange Coast College, which was massive classrooms, the selling point was actually how intimate it was, because I got told that the max a class would ever be is about 30. And so that, to me, I was like, okay. And so it ended up being the only college that I applied to, and the college that I got into.
That's so funny.
Yeah. So it worked out.
Yeah. That's so funny that they have a crazy good film school, and you did communication studies and still made it into, that's so I never realized that until now.
Yeah, there's so many people that I'll bring up that I went to Chapman, and I have to almost get ahead of it. It's like working here, I almost have to get ahead of it and be like, but I wasn't in the film program. But yeah.
Okay. So the fall after college, you and I went to London and we visited your family, and it was so much fun. But I also remember during this time, that's when you kind of started talking with Ross, and I remember you staying up late texting him. How did you guys meet?
So we actually met because our 2 older sisters were best friends, and I ended up I knew his sister, like she came to my 21st birthday. I knew her so well. I knew her way before I knew him. And it wasn't until we kind of all started hanging out as a group, because he was playing basketball at various colleges. And it wasn't until he was home and we were all hanging out as a group that we ended up becoming friends. Like that was kind of the, oh, wow, we're, around the same age. We get along really well. And we became friends. And then a few months later was when it was like, oh, maybe we want to be more than friends. Yeah. And it was, being that close knit, like we were such a close knit, we still are such a close knit group of friends. It was, terrifying, because if something went wrong, the pressure of that is terrifying, but luckily it went very right. And we ended up getting married.
Yeah. And his family has such a cool story. We've actually featured his parents in the magazine.
Yeah.
So do you mind talking about like what their background is?
Yeah. So his parents are actually retired Secret Service agents, and that's how they met. They were both in the Secret Service. Ross's dad was in the Secret Service from like Ford till Clinton, and his mom was in the Secret Service from like Reagan till George W. Bush. It was, so their stories are incredible. I mean, they've been through so much, and, still are so involved and try to help out. Now, they'll do trainings, they'll do a bunch of things. So it's always fascinating talking to them about what they've been through.
Yeah. Literally every time I talk to his mom, I'm like, what do I do if someone comes at me on the street?
Tell me a move, one move.
Exactly. So then after we got back from London, a few months later, you and I got a job together, like you said, working at, it was a different job actually, but working at a job that kind of like posted job postings online. And you had like 2 really big life events happen to you during this like short span of time. But I remember one day you got a call and you had to leave because of Ross.
Yep. Yeah. So Ross actually, he was having, at the beginning of our relationship, he was actually having quite a lot of stomach pains that he couldn't explain. And he ended up getting every test you can imagine to figure out what this was. And they ended up finding a polyp. And they had to remove it, which is a pretty standard procedure. But what ended up happening was he got home and it ended up clearly something was wrong, because he went to the bathroom and something was wrong. And so we ended up having to rush to the hospital, and he ended up losing, I can't even remember how many liters of blood it was, but he ended up losing a crazy amount of blood. And what we found out was he actually, the polyp was precancerous. And when they close it, it's almost like soldering it. They didn't solder it all the way. And so it was it was pumping its own blood supply. And so he was just like rapidly losing blood. And I'll always remember, we both talk about this actually as like kind of when we knew we were in love, because it was like, whoa, like if something like, he started losing consciousness, like it was a whole, and it was terrifying. Like it was something that and so early in our relationship that it kind of put things into perspective a little bit. But yeah, it was crazy. It was something that I never thought would happen, and neither did he, and neither did his family. And that was a long road to recovery after that, just figuring out, what happened, why, making sure that he was totally good, and there was nothing, luckily nothing cancerous ended up happening, but yeah, it was crazy. It was a crazy way to start.
No, I remember you were in the hospital with him you were there the whole time.
Yeah, he was there. They kept him for a few days, and then he ended up going to stay with a family friend who kind of had an easier access house, because it was in Orange County. And he was moving pretty slow just because he had lost so much blood and everything. So yeah, it ended up going and staying with him and making sure that he was okay and whatever I could do. Yeah.
And I think an important note to the story, how tall is he again? 6'8"?
He's 6'8". He technically, so he's 6'8", and he will go to his grave saying he's 6'8". He technically got back surgery, and I'm pretty sure he's 6'9" now.
What? Because he gets taller.
Well, because his L5S1, he had a fracture and he had to get a cage put in. And I'm pretty sure, a lot's happened. Our medical histories are a little crazy. But yeah, he had to get a cage put in. And I remember being like, you've grown. Like the first time he stood up, I was like, you're taller. You're 6'9".
Yeah. But like if someone like our size lost that much blood, it would have been like way more devastating, right?
The doctor ended up telling him that he was this close to getting a blood transfusion, but because his heart was pumping as quickly and the amount that it was pumping, he actually ended up being fine. Like that was the reason why. Yeah.
That's so cool. It's good to know like he has a strong heart.
Got a strong heart.
Yeah. Sucks how you found out, but it's a good thing to know in the future. So also during this time, you ended up applying for a job at Marvel, but it wasn't like quite what you're doing now. You kind of had an interesting path. What was the original job?
Yeah. So I actually ended up running into a friend who was working at Marvel, and we ran into each other at a concert, and I was just figuring out what I wanted to do. We had graduated college. We were working at this job. I was also working at a restaurant at the time. And I was like, I know that neither were like the thing that I wanted. And I had always been a fan of Marvel movies. And so I ended up running into a friend who was working at Marvel at the time and kind of just asked if there was any internship opportunities or if there was anything available. And skill set wise, I kind of was like, okay, maybe in the marketing kind of feels right. But when I talked to her, she was like, I don't have anything. I don't know of anything in marketing, but she was getting promoted. She was going to work for one of the co-presidents, and her position was a business affairs coordinator working in the legal department. So I was like, what's business affairs? And so I ended up, that's the joke of it. But I did end up kind of asking her all of these questions, but really what they needed was somebody to kind of just like keep the department on track. So it was effectively an assistant to the VP of business affairs and the chief counsel. And so when she kind of went through everything, I was like, oh, I think I actually could do that. And I would love to learn about that. Like I was definitely in the mode of like, what's interesting and what do I want to do in this point in my life? And so I applied. I ended up interviewing with the entire legal department, and which was daunting. But I ended up applying, and it wasn't until it was a few months after I applied that I found out that I got the job. And just because they had so many people, they interviewed a lot of people, and just process wise, it was just, it was longer. And so I ended up getting the job, and I started in February of 2015. And I was in that role for about a year and a half, and I learned so much. It was eye-opening. Not only in the legal side, but I actually ended up getting to meet quite a lot of people in that role, people who were also kind of starting out, interns, other coordinators. And that was like, okay, let me ask every question under the sun. And so for that year and a half, I really that was when I knew I wanted to kind of gear towards something more creative. Like I knew I wasn't going to be a lawyer. That wasn't in my cards, but I was like, I have this big interest in the creative side. And so after that, I actually ended up applying for, Victoria Alonso's assistant. She was the head of post-production at the time. And, I had a wonderful conversation with her and ended up, getting hired and becoming her assistant. So I was her assistant for almost 3 years. And then that was where it really kind of solidified what I wanted to do. I wanted to become a producer, and I was going to figure out a way to do it. And ended up, moving to, one of the executives that I had kind of become close with and knew, different project that he was working on, which was Black Widow at the time. And so ended up talking to him because he was hiring on a manager to come and help him. So ended up applying for that, got that. And then things just kind of went from there. But that was the zigzag path that got me there.
Wow. Do you feel like working in the law office like helped you understand the production side of the business too?
Big time. Big time. I mean, to be honest, it's all connected. Like, everything that this company does. Everybody's kind of feeding into some element of the movie making. And so I got to really learn Marvel as a company. I got to understand contracts better, what goes into that. And you know, even through that, kind of understood the steps that go in, like, because you're doing contracts kind of throughout. So you understand kind of different steps through the process of making a movie. So yeah, it was a very good kind of introduction to it. But ended up obviously going a different route.
Yeah. What challenges did you have to overcome getting to be in the production side?
I think in every position, it presented different challenges just because I didn't go to film school. So I think getting crash courses and understanding how things operate and what goes into this. It really was talking to people, asking a million questions, and doing the work to get me there. You know, I think that was something that it was terrifying to not know. And then, you know, you always go through that period of like, oh, am I cut out for this? And then as you keep doing it, you get there. But it was in every position and in every role and project I've been on, there's always that learning curve. But
yeah. So like, in addition to asking questions and stuff like that, like, okay, so we both obviously were in communication studies. I don't have any formal training in journalism. So I know I deal with self-doubt every now and then. Like, so you ask questions to kind of get through that. Do you deal with self-doubt and like kind of met a little bit? Yeah.
Big time. I mean, every day. I feel like it's something that it's trying to be confident when you're still figuring things out. And I think it's something that, yeah, not having formal training and just getting used to how a position is. And I'm very much somebody who, if I do it a few times, like, I'll get there. I just need to do it a few times. And I do need to ask a million questions before I can get there. But yeah, I mean, every new venture is always terrifying. And on a day-to-day, I think there are things that come up that you almost have the like, oh, that's on me. I got to do that. Okay, cool. Like, let's do it. But yeah, you know, I think if you like what you do and you get excited by it, that also gets me through it, at least, is the excitement to do it.
I know, it's such a cool job. So what does your day-to-day kind of look like? And also, I'm sorry if this is a dumb question, but I don't really know the difference between a producer and director. I know that they're different, but can you kind of differentiate the two? I feel like I can't be alone on this.
I'm absolutely sure you are not. I mean, as a producer, it's definitely kind of, I guess, like guiding. Like, it's a lot of guiding the ship, and make, you know, there are so many teams, so many things. We all have the story as our North Star, but it's kind of making sure that everybody's driving towards the same goal. And, you know, I'm very fortunate because at Marvel, we're so heavily involved on the creative that I can't speak for other companies, but on our side, that's something that we do. We are a part of it from the beginning. We hire the writer, we hire the director. We have an initial idea that, you know, we're pulling from publishing in the comics, but we are definitely involved, and we're involved from the beginning till the end. And it's something that I love. That was actually something that drew me to this job, because you get to see every part of the process. So, you know, whether we're in development stage where we're putting the script together and we're working really closely with the teams and, you know, reviewing drafts, giving notes, or we're in principal photography where we're shooting, we're on set every single day. Again, giving notes, it's like constantly driving towards like, what is the best story this can be? Or we're in post-production, again, similarly, what is the best story this can be? So we're in editorial, we're in VFX, we're making sure it looks as great as it can. But it's a lot of overseeing and managing teams and just making sure that we're all kind of just telling the best story that we can.
Right. So you've told me before, kind of like you're in a booth, like behind on set, like watching it all go down, kind of.
So there's, again, at Marvel, there is, we kind of have like a producer's village is what we call it. But, you know, we'll have a group whoever is next, we have our producers, we have VFX producer, VFX supervisor. We typically have a few people with us, but we are watching the monitors. And what I tend to do, and kind of what I think is the most helpful, is you have a close relationship with the director. So when things are happening, sometimes you're up right next to that director. Sometimes you're back at Producers Village. You're kind of running around, just making sure that, watching the takes and making sure that every single thing is what you envisioned, or maybe it could be better because you didn't think of it until you're actually seeing it in that moment. But yeah, I mean, there's Directors Village, there's Producers Village, and I'm kind of running in between.
Yeah. Wow. So, you've told me before, like there's certain scenes in the movies that you just were like taken aback by, like just really, and like the Black Panther Wakanda Forever scene. Can you talk a little bit about that? Like your favorite moments?
Yeah. I mean, favorite moments at Marvel, I would say I have a pinch me moment that it was actually when I was an assistant, but it really was wow, who am I? What am I doing here? Moment. And it was when they were doing, spoiler alert if nobody has seen this, but they were doing Tony's funeral for Endgame. And I remember I arrived a little bit early. I was getting there to make sure that I knew where Victoria needed to be. And I remember getting there and realizing the amount of people that were there in one moment. And you start seeing all this cast come in, and it's cast that me as a Marvel fan have watched over the years, and different people are interacting too, that you're like, wow, that's crazy. But I just had this moment, and I'll always remember it, but I just remember standing there and being like, wow, why am I here? Like, what am I doing here? And this is so wild to work at Marvel and see this happen, because it is a moment almost in Marvel history that I just felt very, very happy to be there, very blessed to be there. Cause I was just, it was something that whole week kind of, because then they did the 10-year anniversary photo. And again, it was just a big pinch me moment of like, this is incredible. This is very cool. But yeah.
Do you have any favorite scenes that you've helped with?
Yeah. I mean, I have a few, to be honest. Yeah. I would say in Black Widow, we were doing the dinner scene, with, the family sitting down for dinner. And we had talked about that scene so much in development. And it was something that we were always kind of like, is this going to work? Are they going to feel like a family? And then they sat down and they played off one another. And it was just like, oh, wow. Like this couldn't be more perfect. Like it was like funny and emotional in all the right ways. And it just really worked. And they cast and the director just, brought it to life. It was very cool.
Yeah. That scene was so good.
Yeah.
I love that one. I literally only go see the movies that you have produced and then stand up at the end and clap when I see your name.
Oh my God. That's so funny. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's been a lot of fun. It's been, it's of course there's a lot of work that goes into it, but it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah. So, what's next, or like, what can you tell us that you're working on, if anything?
Yeah. Well, I'm currently working on Captain America: Brave New World. So just in post-production on that, and it comes out February 2025. But yeah. So we'll be, there was I think with everything in Hollywood, there was a bit of a reshuffle. So yeah. But yeah, it's been fun putting that together and seeing it go from page to picture. So
amazing. Well, before I let you go, there are 3 final questions that I have to ask you. They are kind of like a reflection on the journey that led you here today. We call them the Thoughtful 3. So what was the best advice that you received when you were first starting out?
The best advice, honestly, it's something we've even talked about in this conversation, but be confident in yourself. And there are moments that I still feel today that I'll get in a room and I'm like, oh boy. But it is truly, it's being confident in yourself and building yourself up when you think that you might not belong in a room, or you shouldn't raise your hand. I think it's being confident in yourself when it's really hard to not be, to go against yourself. I think that's something that I would say, one of my bosses told me, like, you just have to be confident in yourself. And I will forever take that with me because it's true.
Mm-hmm. What was the worst advice that you received? If you received any bad advice?
I've been pretty fortunate. In honestly who I've worked with. I think that it wasn't even from a boss. I remember it was a colleague. When I was really early on, this might sound silly, but I was going to take a day off. And I was so nervous to take a day off. I was taking a Friday off because I think Ross and I were doing like a little trip. But I remember a colleague of mine was like, "Oh, you probably shouldn't do that. Like, that's going to look bad." And I was like, "Oh my God, you've confirmed all my fears. Why would you do that?" And I did it. I ended up taking the day off and everything was fine. And I had an amazing time. And I think it was bad advice and it wasn't even advice. It was almost just like cautionary, but it was something that I look at and I'm like, no, it's so important to have work-life balance. And I think that hearing that, it just was like, I was so terrified. And then when I did it and nothing went wrong, I was like, okay, I do need to prioritize myself and prioritize spending time with family. And it can be so hard when you're so in the mix on everything else. But that was something that I was like, yeah, I would never do that. I would never say, if you need to be with family, you need to be with family. Like, it's never going to be. So yeah.
you work like crazy hours, right? Like, what's like an average week?
It depends on what we have going on, but it's around like 12 hours a day, 12 to 16 hours a day. It's crazy.
7 days a week?
5 days a week.
Okay. Still. Yeah. That's crazy. And then lastly, what advice would you personally give to someone who wants to be in the film industry or wants to become a producer?
I think I would advise to never give up, which is very, I would say never give up on what you want to do because there are so many paths to get there. Like I can look at my path and go, okay, I didn't go to film school. I didn't even start out doing a film role, but there are so many ways to get to your end goal that don't give up. Like, just keep trying and get your foot in the door. And then somehow by meeting somebody, it'll work out. And I think that I've seen it happen time and time again. So it's something that I don't always think that you have to take one path. There are many paths, so don't give up.
Oh, I love that. Well, thank you so much for taking the time. I'm sure you're so busy with your post-production.
Of course. No. But I love to be here.
And I can't wait to see you again soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much.
Of course. Bye.